Hi, my name is Shimon Iman bin Shimon Mali, metric number AS11753 from Group 3. So today, our group will be present about community and ecosystem ecology. This chapter consists of 4 subtopics, but our main concern is these 2 subtopics, community development and dynamics of an ecosystem. So this is the learning outcome of our lecture today. At the end of community development subtopic, you must be able to determine the correct sequence that occur during sequence of event that occur during ecological succession and compare the types of ecological succession. At the end of dynamics of an ecosystem subtopic, you must be able to describe interaction between organism and environment that comprise an ecosystem, to identify the way organisms obtain their nutrients, to interpret the energy flow, and to explain the energy flow through food webs and ecological pyramids.
Assalamualaikum, I am Amalia Khadijah. Now I will start with the first presentation, which is ecological succession. Okay, now I'm going to talk about ecological succession. So what is actually ecological succession? It is a change within a community involving a series of species replacement. You can see ecological succession can be divided into 2 parts, which is the first one is primary succession and the second one is secondary succession. So firstly, I'm going to talk about what is primary succession actually is. Primary succession is a formation of soil from exposed rock due to the wind, water, and other abiotic factors. It occurs in areas where there is no base soil, such as places that have undergo volcanic eruption or glacier retreat. So to make it easy to remember, succession begins in an area with no remainings of the older community. Volcanic explosions can create new land or sterilize existing areas, while retreating glaciers can have the same effect, such as volcanic explosions, because when the glaciers retreat, it will leave only exposed bare rock behind them, causing primary succession to happen. The first stage is rock or lichen stage. So the first stage, lichen, will grow on top of the bare rock that are left behind by, like I said earlier, retreating glaciers. And then the second step will happen, which is shrub stage. Shrub will start to grow on the soil, and then the third stage will come right through after that, which is low tree stage. So low tree stage, small tree will start to grow, and then there will be the last stage in primary succession, which is high tree stage, where high trees will start to grow at that soil, and then it will turn into a forest. Next, secondary succession. To easily differentiate between these two, between primary and secondary succession happens when that place have any sort of disturbance, where there is progressive change from grasses to shrubs to a mixture of shrubs and trees. It is actually the same process such as the primary succession, but for secondary succession, it started after that place undergo destruction. So disruption that you can take examples such as flood, fire, and also disruption that not only caused by natural disaster but also by humans as well, such as deforestation. What makes this different is that succession happens at a place that there are already soil in it, compared to the primary succession where there is no soil. Next, I'm going to talk about pioneer species. So, pioneer species is the first producer that inhabit a community after a disturbance. It is the first species that begins secondary succession before being replaced by the other species that comes after that. So here you can see the progress from grasses, low shrubs, high shrubs, shrub or tree mix, low trees, high trees, and then you can reach the climax community. So this is secondary succession. Okay, lastly, I'm going to talk about models of succession. So the first one is facilitation model, which is pioneer species establish a presence on the site of disturbance. Pioneer species grow at a place first and then it modify the site by regenerating the soil with organic material for the other species to move in. And then when the other species move in, it edge out the pioneers, and then this process will repeat itself several times until the ecosystem reach the climax stage. So facilitation model is just what we just saw earlier, which is this stage, grasses, and then becomes climax community. It's the same. Okay, next for inhibition model, the first arrival take precedence of the area first, and then there will cause competition for space, nutrients, and light for the new species. That's why it's called inhibition, as they fight for space, nutrients, and lights. And the first arrival causing the next species to not be able to grow at that place because of the competition. Lastly is tolerance model. Based on the name itself, tolerance, which is different types of plants, can colonize an area at the same time and tolerate with each other for each other to grow. And then early stages of succession are driven by competition, but the later stage are dominated by species that can invade or tolerate lower resource regimes. Species at tolerance model neither facilitate nor inhibit, but they simply get there at different times due to differences in life history. So here, let's watch this video.
Assalamu alaikum and hi everyone. My name is Haris Hazmi and here I will talk about dynamic of an ecosystem. So, what is an ecosystem? So basically, an ecosystem is composed of the interactions between populations as well as their physical environment. The abiotic or non-living components of an ecosystem include the atmosphere, water, and soil, while the biotic or living components can be categorized according to their food source as autotrophs or heterotrophs. So next topic, I will talk about autotrophs. So, autotrophs are organisms that require only inorganic nutrients and an outside energy source to produce organic nutrients for their own use and for all the other members of a community. So, autotrophs is known as the producer because they produce food from inorganic nutrients. So, we have three types of producer, which is land plants or green plants, algae, and autotrophic bacteria. First, we have land plants or green plants. Green plants are the dominant photosynthesizers on land because they have a chlorophyll that absorbs sunlight and produce nutrients or food for the plants itself. So next, we also have algae, which is consist chlorophyll, and they possess chlorophyll and carry on photosynthesis in freshwater and marine habitats. Algae are aquatic autotrophs that make up the phytoplankton load in most bodies of water. So now we talk about autotrophic bacteria, which is some autotrophic bacteria are chemosynthetic. They obtain energy by oxidizing inorganic compounds such as ammonia, nitrates, and sulfides, and they use this energy to synthesize organic compounds. Chemoautotrophs have been found to support communities in some caves as well as at hydrothermal vents along deep sea oceanic ridges where sunlight is unavailable. So we have green plants, which is called blood dragon tree. We have green algae, and this is autotrophic bacteria. Next, we will talk about heterotrophs. So, heterotrophs are organisms that need to perform organic nutrients they can use as an energy sources. They are called consumer because they consume food that was generated by a producer. We have three types of heterotrophs, which is herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. The first type is herbivores. Herbivores are animals that graze directly on plants or algae. In terrestrial habitats, various insects are small herbivores, antelopes and bisons are large herbivores. In aquatic habitats, zooplankton are small herbivores, various fishes and manatees are large herbivores. Secondly, we have carnivores. Carnivores feed on other animals, whereas birds that feed on insects are carnivores, and so are hawks that feed on birds and small mammals. The next one is omnivores. Omnivores are animals that feed on both plants and animals. Chickens, raccoons, and humans are examples of omnivores. Some animals are scavengers, such as vultures and jackals, which eat the carcasses of dead animal. Jadi dekat sini, heterotrophs adalah haiwan yang memerlukan nutrien daripada haiwan lain ataupun benda lain. Jadi mereka adalah dipanggil consumer sebab mereka makan benda makhluk lain dan tidak menghasilkan makanan sendiri. Jadi kita ada tiga jenis heterotrophs, iaitu herbivore, carnivore and omnivore. Herbivore adalah haiwan yang hanya memakan producer, iaitu mereka makan tumbuhan, alga untuk survive. Carnivores pula, mereka ataupun haiwan ini memakan haiwan lain untuk menjana tenaga. Dan omnivore pula, mereka akan makan tumbuhan dan haiwan sebagai sumber makanan mereka. So this is the examples of herbivorous animals. We have koala, we have panda and rabbits. These animals eat the producer, which is they eat plants. So the next one is examples of carnivorous animals. We have cheetah, we have a red fox, and this is bear. These animals eat other animals to survive and gain energy. The third one is examples of omnivorous animals. We have chicken, we have raccoon, and we have ostrich. Interesting, right? So the next is detritivores. So detritivores are organisms that feed on detritus, which consists of decomposing particles of organic matter. Okay, what is detritus mean? Detritus is organic matter made up of dead plant and animal materials. So we have land detritivores and marine detritivores. The examples of land detritivores is beetles, termites, and ants. While marine detritivores, we have crabs and lobsters, which is in group of crustacean, and sea stars, which is echinoderms. So now we will watch a video about detritivores and the differences between detritivores and decomposers.
Welcome to Moo Math and Science. In this video, I'd like to talk about detrivores. Detrivores are heterotrophs that eat fragments of dead matter in an ecosystem. As a result, this helps return nutrients to the soil, air, and water so they can be reused by other organisms. Some common examples of detrivores include worms and millipedes. Decomposers, which are similar to detrivores, break down dead organisms by releasing digestive enzymes. Some common examples of decomposers are fungi and bacteria. All heterotrophs, including detrivores, perform some decomposition when they consume other organisms and break down its body into organic compounds. However, it is primarily the decomposers that break down organic compounds and make nutrients available for producers to reuse. Without detrivores and decomposers, the entire biosphere would be littered with dead organisms. Let's take a look at a couple of other examples of detrivores. We have dung flies, slugs, sea stars, sea cucumbers, and fiddler crabs. All of these are organisms that feed on dead organic matter in an ecosystem. As a result, they help clean up the ecosystem and return nutrients so they can be reused. Thanks for watching, and Moo Math uploads a new math and science video every day.
So now we know about detritivores and decomposers. What is the differences and what is similarities? So that's all from me. I will pass my presentation to Ivy and Rasha. Thank you.
Hi everyone, so now I'm going to explain to you guys about energy flows through an ecosystem. So let's go. Now we are going to talk about the flow of energy through an ecosystem. We know all energy originates from the sun. Now we know sun gives off solar radiation, but most of the solar radiation actually either reflected by the ozone layer or absorbed, for example, by the clouds in the atmosphere. So only a small proportion of that solar energy actually reaches the producer, which are the plants on the surface of the earth. So 90% of energy reaching producers is actually lost by reflection or incorrect wavelength for absorption by pigments. So what does it mean by incorrect wavelength? A lot of the light that reaches the plants is not actually the correct wavelength to be absorbed by the photosynthetic pigments. For example, chlorophyll A, which absorbs red and blue light, and we know it reflects green light. So this part, the visible spectrum, the green light, will be reflected by these pigments, and therefore that white energy is not going to be used in making glucose. Also, some of the solar radiation that reaches the plant, it doesn't actually hit the photosynthetic pigment. So we know that these pigments are present in the leaf, so some of the light actually going to either pass through in between the leaf, it might hit parts of the plants that don't photosynthesize, for example, the bark or the branches and so on. Now we know the light energy that does get absorbed by the plants by the photosynthetic pigment is used to generate sugar like glucose, and this sugar are actually used to make other organic molecules like amino acid, therefore protein, fatty acid, and lipids within the plant itself. So some of that light energy is actually going to be fixed into organic molecules in the plant. Now the primary consumer is the herbivore. So as you can see, we've got the giraffe here in the middle. We know herbivores, they do eat plant materials, so they are going to actually take in as holozoic feeders. So we know that giraffe is holozoic feeders. What does it mean by holozoic feeders? That means it got an internal digestive system, so it's going to take in the organic material, break it down, and absorb many of these molecules into its blood. However, it's not the 100% energy transferred between the plants and the primary consumers. Why? Because not all the plants get consumed. So, for example, the giraffe tend to eat the leaves, so it's going to mainly eat the leaves of the plant only. It doesn't eat the bark, it doesn't eat the branches, and they obviously didn't eat the root system of the plant. So not all the energy wrapped up in the plant biomass get transferred into the herbivore. So we also need to recognize that a lot of plant material contains cellulose. Herbivores are very good at digesting and breaking down cellulose to absorb the glucose from that. We also need to know that not all of the cellulose will be digested. Some of it will be ingested in the feces of the giraffe, and therefore this contributes to the lack of energy transfer from producer to primary consumer. Now, when we look at the lion, this is going to be the secondary consumer, and it's going to consume the herbivores. So they mainly eat meat tissue, which is largely protein based. So now we know all the energy in the biomass of the giraffe that is not going to be transferred into the lion, and that's because a lot of the energy that is consumed by the giraffe, for example, will be ingested out, and we know the lion is not going to eat it. We also know not all the parts of the giraffe were going to be eaten by the lion. We know as well the giraffe, in this case, will excrete certain molecules like urea, which is not going to be utilized by the lion. So again, there's a loss of energy from the primary consumer to the secondary consumer. Now we know any living organism, at one point, they are going to die. Even when they are dead, there is still energy locked in that organism. The organic material wrapped up in the dead plants or the dead animals is going to be decomposed by a saprophytic organism. Detritus is a non-living organic matter, for example, feces, fallen leaves, and remains of dead organism. So all of these factors get decomposed by decomposers or saprophytes. Decomposer is actually microbes that obtain nutrients from dead organisms by extracellular digestion. And we know saprophytes include bacteria and fungi. One of the organisms that we need to talk about are detritivores. And now, this detritus is a non-living organic matter. They can start to be broken down also by holozoic organisms such as dung beetles, earthworms, and many more. They are holozoic because they take in dead organic detritus and they break it down internally with internal digestive system. Next, in ecology, productivity is the rate at which energy is added to the bodies of organisms in the form of biomass. So what is biomass? Biomass is simply the amount of matter that's stored in the bodies of a group of organisms. Productivity can be defined for any trophic level or other group, and it may take units of either energy or biomass. There are two basic types of productivity: gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. Gross primary productivity, also known as GPP, is the rate of conversion of light energy into chemical energy of organic molecules, for example, glucose, by photosynthesis, and the unit for GPP is kJ per m squared per year. Producers such as plants use some of this energy from metabolism or cellular respiration and some for growth and building tissue. The second one is net primary productivity, also known as NPP. NPP means gross primary productivity minus the rate of energy loss to metabolism and maintenance. In other words, it's the rate at which energy is stored as biomass by plants or other primary producers and made available to the consumers in the ecosystem. Let's take a look at the picture here. We can see the energy that hits the plant, 0.8% energy captured by photosynthesis and converted to glucose. So 55% of the glucose might be used up in cellular respiration and lost as heat to the environment, and 45% of the glucose might be used to make other organic molecules, and it might end up as a biomass within the actual plant material itself. So this NPP that is available to the next trophic level, which would be the herbivores or omnivores also. We can use this equation to allow us to calculate NPP. And as I stated before, we know NPP is GPP minus respiration, or glucose used or the glucose used up in cellular respiration, which a lot of the energy is released to the environment as heat energy. So NPP is basically GPP minus respiration. NPP is any energy left over after respiration is stored in plants. For example, starch or lipid, which it is a biomass equal to food available to primary consumers. GPP is the rate at which product of photosynthesis are formed, which is glucose, which is basically the rate of which light energy is being absorbed and converted chemical energy in glucose. Respiration is a substantial amount of these products are used up in respiration by the plant. Next, we are going to take a look at this example question. The diagram represents the energy flow in kilojoule per meter squared per year through the community in one area of the sea. Calculate the net primary productivity, or NPP. So we know the situation is in one area of the sea. So the producer here is algae. So if we start off with a diagram at the top, we can see 1.26 times 10 to the power of 6 of energy of solar radiation at sea surface. And that energy, some of it is going to be fixed by the algae, because we know they are the producers that can photosynthesize. 6,300 kilojoule per meter squared per year of energy is fixed as biomass, and we know this is going to be the GPP. NPP is actually related to the producers, and you can only get NPP in organisms that are autotrophic, that can either photosynthesize like the algae. So we will want to write the equation first, NPP minus GPP from the producer minus respiration, which is the glucose used up in respiration, and some of the energy is lost as heat to the environment. So as we can see here, the algae do respire because every living organism has to use glucose and it respires the glucose. So we know 6,300 is GPP minus 1,260 as the energy used up in respiration, or the glucose used in respiration, and this will give us a value of 5,040 kilojoule per meter square per year. So the NPP from the algae available to the next trophic level is going to be 5040, or we can call it as the biomass. Next, when we look at the picture on the right hand side, we can see 1,008 kilojoule of energy is uneaten phytoplankton sinking to seabed. So these algae fall to the seabed, so they are obviously die. So as they fall away, because the lack of light energy, they can't photosynthesize, so they end up just dying off and they sink to the seabed. So we know any dead organisms will be decomposed by saprophytic bacteria and fungi. So 1,008 is not available to the next trophic level because that the dead phytoplankton is going to be decomposed by decomposers organism. So kita tak ambil 1,008. Okay. So the next equation that we need to know about is gross ecological efficiency. And gross ecological efficiency is a measure of how much energy is transferred from one trophic level to the next trophic level. And it is always going to be less than 100%. So the equation is gross ecological efficiency equal to energy in one trophic level divided by total energy in previous trophic level and multiply it by 100. So this example down here at the bottom of the slide, we can see the gross ecological efficiency for the primary consumer which is the grasshopper. Why? Because grasshopper akan consume this flower. Okay. So we can see here the trophic level has 1,213 joules tenaga, and we know the producer, which is the flower, has 16,580 joules of energy. So we just put this value into this equation above, and that will give us 7.3% ecological efficiency. So 7.3% of the energy in this flower is transferred to the next trophic level, which is the primary consumer, which is the grasshopper. So next we are going to look at energy flow. So we know all energy originates from the sun and they gives off solar radiation. So we will start with primary producer, and we know producer fixed energy in sunlight in the form of chemical energy in glucose or organic molecules. So A might be a primary producer, for example, a plant. Now the solar radiation that hits the primary, we know not all of it will be utilized in photosynthesis. The light might be reflected by different parts of the plants. They might be reflected or wrong wavelength of light for absorption, or light transmitted through the leaf. Next, we know any organisms, and that includes plants and animals, they respire. So the glucose that the plants make is used by all the cells of the plant in cellular respiration, and some of the energy we lost as heat to the environment. So as we can see, the arrow here, 26,532 kilojoule meter squared per year of energy is lost as heat to the environment. So next, the arrow at the bottom here, it indicates death. So all the plants at some point will die, and when they do, we know they are going to be decomposed by decomposer. So moving on to B, which is the primary consumer. So B might be a herbivore or maybe an omnivore as well. So C is the secondary consumer, which it will consume the primary consumer, which it can be a carnivore or an omnivore as well. Lastly, D, The next trophic level is a tertiary consumer. So this is what we call a top carnivore that consume other carnivores. So if you look at the B, primary consumer, again, all the cell of this organism respire. So the glucose that is broken down will be converted to energy, ATP, but some of the energy is usually lost as a heat to the environment. Now we know herbivores, for example, not all of the food they eat will be digested and absorbed. So some of the cellulose, for example, the fiber will be digested as feces or may be excreted as urine. We also know all living organisms obviously going to die and therefore be decomposed, and this goes for the secondary consumer and the tertiary consumer as well. So the next one, we'll take a look at this example question. We have three letters here. We got R, C, and E. So the key states that R represents for the respiratory loss. So this is the glucose that used in cellular respiration, and the energy that is conserved in ATP is going to lose as heat. C represents the energy that is consumed by the next trophic level, and E represent the expelled energy from decomposition of dead organism. So the question asks us to calculate the respiratory loss by the herbivores and then the top carnivores. So the question asks us to find the R2 and R4. We are going to work what this R2 value must be. So the herbivore here had consumed 20,227 units of energy. Now the expelled energy, death decomposition, digested material decomposed, excreted molecules decomposed, is 3,732 units of energy. So when we look at here, 919 units of energy is available to the carnivore. So this must be the biomass within the herbivore. So we are going to do 20,227 minus 3,732 minus 919, and that will give us 15,576 units of energy. So this is the answer for R2. Next, we will need to find the respiratory loss for the top carnivores, which is the R4. So the energy that's being consumed by the top carnivore is 51 units of energy. Now, because this is the top carnivore, it is not eaten by any predators. 20 units of energy is lost through expelled energy. So that must mean the R4 value at the top is quite simply 51 minus 20, and that will give us 31 units of energy. And that is the answer for R4. That's all from me. Thank you.
So now I will explain about trophic level. So trophic level is position of an organism in a food web or chain. So in the trophic level, in the food web or chain, the green plant of the producer is usually in the first trophic level. The animal that eat the green plant, which is herbivore animal, is in the second trophic level, and the animal that eat herbivore animal is in the third trophic level. So basically, trophic level shows that organisms link to one another in a straight line based on feeding relationship or who eat whom. So this is an example of a food web. So based on this food web, grasses is in the first trophic level, grasshopper and mouse is in the second trophic level, hawk, coyote, vulture and snake is in the third trophic level. But if we focus in one food chain, I'll take this chain, the trophic level is different from the web. So the first trophic level in this chain is grasses, second is grasshopper, third is hawk, fourth is coyote, and last, the fifth trophic level is vulture. So this is example of food web. In this food web, we can clearly see that this is the first trophic level, the second, third, and fourth. But it will be different if we look at particular food chain. This is an example of food chain. So this is a grazing food chain. Grazing food chain, this is the first trophic level, second, third. Same goes to the other food chains. And this is detrital food chain because it starts with not green plant. This is detritus. This is photosynthetic bacteria. Last is ecological pyramids. Ecological pyramid shows the feeding pattern of organism in an ecosystem. So each bar in the pyramid represent different trophic level based on who eat whom and how energy transferred to another. So this is the basic structure of the pyramids. We call it as upright pyramids, but ecological pyramids have other two shape of pyramids. I will explain about this later. And we have three types of pyramid. First, numbers pyramid based on population of organism. Biomass pyramid based on total weight of organism, and energy pyramid based on overall flow energy. So numbers pyramid, they have two shapes. The first shape is upright, and the second shape is I call it as wonky shape because it starts with small and then suddenly big and small back. So this is I call it as wonky shape. And then the biomass pyramid, we have two shapes. The first one is upright and the second one is inverted. Energy pyramid is always upright. These different shape happen at different ecosystem. Okay. So for number pyramids, for upright shape, this is an example. We have thousands of grasses that can feed a group of rabbit. This group of rabbit can feed few of wolf. But this is the wonky pyramids. Wonky pyramids, why? Because one tree can feed hundreds of caterpillar. Hundreds of caterpillar can feed a group of bird, and this group of bird can feed few other birds. Next is energy pyramid. Energy pyramids is always upright, like I say, because they follow 10% rules. So how to count the energy that pass to the consumer? So let's say that the producer have 100,000 energy. When the primary consumer eat the producer, only 10% out of 100,000 energy will be transferred to the primary consumer. 10% out of 100%, 10% out of 100,000 is 10,000. So when the secondary consumer eat the primary consumer, only 10% out of 10,000 energy will be transferred to the secondary consumer. 10% out of 10,000 is 1,000. And same goes to the next level. Why 10%? So This is because organism normally didn't eat every part of the food that they eat. Okay, for example, birds, an eagle eat snakes. They didn't eat the skeleton part. Okay, so the next reason is bits they do eat might not be absorbed. So, for example, the bird eats the snakes. The scale of the snake that they eat not be absorbed. They will come out as a stool. And the last reason is most of the nutrient that animal absorb used to release energy through respiration. So for biomass pyramid, I have a video for you.
Pyramids of biomass, on the other hand, are almost always large at the bottom and then get smaller going up. This is because rather than showing the number of organisms, they show the number of the total mass in that triangle. Think about it this way. One caterpillar weighs about 3 grams. One oak tree weighs about 30 tons, which is 30 million grams. So that's 10 million caterpillars to equal the mass of one oak tree. Because of this, the bark of the oak tree is much wider than the bark of the caterpillar, even though all caterpillars may have one oak tree.
Okay, so but biomass pyramid can be inverted too, but in different ecosystem. This is one ecosystem. The mass of phytoplankton is less than zooplankton. The mass of zooplankton is less than small fishes. Small fishes mass is smaller than large fishes. So that's why the shape of the pyramids can be inverted. So I think that's all from us, group 3. Thank you.